Welcome to Carrion Creature Feature. I'm your host, Aura. In tonight's deadly episode, we delve into a condition that humiliates our poor protagonist. But don't feel too bad for her, because even the most frail and weak have sharp teeth. Ready yourself for another blood-soaked tale as we embark on another twisted journey on Carrion Creature Feature. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay tuned for more panic-inducing tales of doom.
When I was a young girl, I had a condition called myasthenia gravis, which left my muscles weak and tired before school ended. I often had to walk with braces on my legs because they would give out underneath the weight of my body. I was clumsy and weak, and the other kids knew it, and they could all hear me coming as my braces squeaked when I hobbled in their direction. I had to be isolated from the children on many occasions because many of them would knock me over and laugh as I struggled to get up. Sometimes I would throw up or my bladder would unleash a steaming hot puddle of embarrassment that I remained soaked in throughout the day. I spent my childhood reeking of shame and humiliation. I suppose teachers got tired of picking me up and fending off the other children, so they decided I was better off alone. However, I didn't mind. I never enjoyed being around the other children anyway, and my desire for isolation continued into my adulthood. I spent most of my days drawing and writing. I've gotten talented at these things because, without friends, you need a hobby. I worked from home freelancing, which made me a decent living. But I had no social life, and whenever I went out, I had to be in a wheelchair. I didn't mind driving, and it was a miracle that my condition went away over time. Unfortunately, my fear of falling was so intense that standing and walking in public places would cause a panic attack. It would get so bad that I would even get vertigo, fall, and then vomit and pee on myself, just like I did as a child. Only this time, my symptoms were psychosomatic. I saw a therapist who suggested the wheelchair, which turned out to be a good idea. I had minimal issues walking to my car or getting out of my car to get my wheelchair, but I had to walk painfully slow. This was a stark contrast to how I was when I was by myself. In my home, I do cartwheels. I jump on my bed like a child while singing my favorite song into a hairbrush. I kick, punch, and do HIIT workouts. I was free when I was alone, and the rest of the world was a prison. But I know deep down the prison was entirely my own making. I struggled to see that I wasn't the same clumsy creature with an odd gait. I had built up the muscles in my legs over the years, and it showed in my sturdy, muscle-bound calves and thighs. However, fear was blocking me from seeing that. I wasn't ugly, nor was I extravagant, but I could potentially have a normal life if I could just get rid of the wheelchair. Too bad I wasn't there yet. I looked in the mirror as I brushed my ginger hair and counted the freckles on my face as I did every morning. My green eyes sparkled with their usual sadness, and my pale arms and shoulders were dotted with freckles and red from the hot water. I sighed. For the first time in my life, I felt trapped in my own home. I rolled up to my therapist's office and thanked someone kind enough to open the door for me. I greeted the woman behind the counter. "Hello, how are you?" "I'm doing well, miss. Thank you," she beamed. "The doctor will be with you in a moment." Dr. Kirby emerged from behind a door just as I turned away from the receptionist. "Good afternoon, Angela." "Hey there, Dr. Kirby. Are you ready for me?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, holding the door open for me. She sat in her leather brown chair as I parked myself in front of the couch. The ambiance of the room was relaxing. Ivy plants sat on each side of a large window, which let in a lot of natural lighting. Her desk was made of shiny cherry wood, which was spotless except for a laptop and a small stack of files on its surface. A candle burned on a small table in the corner, filling the room with the scent of lavender and vanilla. "How have you been, Angela?" Dr. Kirby asked, holding a pen and a clipboard in her lap. "I'm tired of being trapped in my home all the time," I responded plainly. The last time you were here, you said you felt free in the confines of your home. What changed? I'm not sure. I just know I was looking at myself in the mirror this morning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt discontent. I'm not sure what I feel. I just know I need to make changes, and I'm not sure where to start, I explained. Dr. Kirby suggested that I try going for a walk down the block. If it was too much, I wouldn't be far from home. I stood on the front steps, taking in the world around me. It was early afternoon, and across the street, Mrs. Robinson was digging weeds out of her garden. A few feet away, a couple of girls around the age of 8 were playing hopscotch, and a neighbor was tinkering under the hood of their car. I felt calm, so I took another step. I continued to put one foot in front of the other, and it felt as if something had taken over and forced my legs to move. I began to run. I'd spent 2 years in that wheelchair in public, and now, out of nowhere, I had the urge to run. But I had to stop. I began to feel dizzy and overwhelmed. I was further away from home than I wanted to be. I had no idea where I was. I used a brick wall to steady myself as 3 men approached me with malicious intent. "Well, hey there, pretty lady. You got anything on you?" one of them asked. "No." I tried to turn around, but one of them grabbed me, which triggered memories of getting bullied in school. For a moment, I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I felt like that sad, gimping little girl that was helpless to defend herself. That is, until I realized I wasn't that little girl. I've been beaten, robbed, and had my self-esteem crushed to the point that I couldn't stand or walk. Enough was enough. Finally, I knew rage, and I became lost in it. Everything was a blur, and their blows felt like nothing more than wind against my skin. I don't know how I got home, and I'm not sure when I came back to my body. All I know is I tasted blood. I felt a sizable chunk of something solid and slimy in my mouth and spit it out into my hand, only to notice I had bitten off a lump of flesh from one of the men. I held it up and sniffed it. I've always been curious about what human flesh would taste like. I cooked the meat in a small frying pan with butter and seasoning. Then I cut off a small piece. With blood still on my face and hands, I placed the meat on my tongue and chewed slowly. I closed my eyes, savoring the sweet, succulent taste of the tender flesh. I didn't know what part of the body this came from, but I will certainly find out. As I sopped up the rest of the flesh, I wondered to myself how I would go about that. Should I go back to where I was attacked? I couldn't even remember what happened to those men or where I was. But since I came home with a chunk of human meat in my mouth, I knew it couldn't have been good. "Well, hey there, little bird." I froze and kept my gaze on my plate when I heard a male voice. I slowly lifted my head to see the handsome face of my brother Lance, who died in prison. I loved my brother. He was the only person who was ever nice to me. But to others, he was seen as a vicious serial killer. My parents took care of me, sure, but I could tell they were embarrassed by me and thought of me as a burden. Lance, my brother, never made me feel that way. I didn't care that he killed 7 men and 1 woman. I didn't care that he kept their bones and made jewelry with them. And I didn't care that he kept pictures of his victims after he killed them. It was obvious at this point that a sickness ran in the family. "Remember when I used to call you that?" I smiled. "I do." "Because one day, you're gonna fly far, far away from here." I giggled, just like I did when I was a little girl. His stringy blonde hair fell in front of his blue eyes, and his smile beamed benevolently. God, how I loved that smile. And I would do anything in this world to see it again. My big brother would be so proud of me, facing my fears and then coming home covered in blood. Hell, he would have baked me a cake. Lance licked his plump, pink lips and then looked at me with a serious expression. He leaned on the back of the chair. "You know you're not a little bird anymore, Angela. You're a big girl now." I nodded. "I wish you were still here." I'll always be here. That's how I know you're a buzzard. You're a large, ferocious, hungry bird, and it's time you took what you wanted." Lance stood tall, his chest puffed up with pride as he smirked down at me. "Kill, feed, and consume, my baby buzzard." The moment I blinked was the moment he was gone, and tears fell from my eyes. I sat in silence for a moment to process what I saw, only to conclude that it was nothing more than a hallucination. I looked at my plate. A mixture of cooking oil and human blood sat on its surface. I stood to take my plate to the sink, only to feel dizzy, and my legs felt like jello, just like they did when I was out in public. But I didn't feel nauseous like I normally did. Instead, I was ravenous. I sat back down and slurped the pink liquid on the plate, and then I licked it clean. Once again, I stood. I didn't get dizzy. I didn't feel nauseous, but I still felt hungry. Ding dong! The sound of the doorbell rang, snapping me out of my reverie. My legs felt solid as I walked to the door, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerful, and I wasn't afraid of answering the door. "Dr. Kirby!" I was shocked to see her at my house. She's only ever been over once. "What are you doing here?" I had a bad feeling and wanted to check on you. Would it be all right if I came in?" she asked, eager to enter a hungry lion's den. "Come on in," I politely stated. Dr. Kirby sat on the couch. "Did you go for your walk?" "I did," I replied as I sat in the chair. It made me realize a lot about myself," I said with a soft smile. "Feed, little buzzard." My brother's voice echoed in my mind. I didn't need her anymore, and my legs were feeling weak again. Dr. Kirby sat there expectantly, and I didn't know what to say, so instead I excused myself. I felt dizzy and unbalanced as I stood in the kitchen, trying to think of what to do. But I had to do something quick before I collapsed. I put a knife in my back pocket, then filled up a couple of glasses of water and took them to the living room. I set the glasses down and sat next to Dr. Kirby. "I want to thank you for being there for me and encouraging me all these years. It's truly been helpful, and I will always be grateful." "Angela, what are you?" I plunged a knife deep into her neck before she had a chance to scream. Gurgling noises escaped her mouth as she choked on her own blood. Blood spattered from the wound in her neck as she stared at me wide-eyed with shock and confusion. "I don't need you as a therapist anymore, doctor, but I do need one more thing from you." I lunged at her, biting off a scrap of game from her cheek as she bled out. I chewed the bloody, mangled flesh as I watched Dr. Kirby until she stopped breathing. I wasn't sure where to start, so I lifted her skirt and cut off a chunk of her thigh meat. I would cut up the rest of her body later and stick her leftovers in the deep freeze.
Welcome back, fellow listener. We've peeled back the flesh and went for the bone in this tale. As we bid farewell, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to ensure you never miss another blood-soaked episode. Stay tuned for more terror-inducing stories that will keep you hiding beneath your bedsheets. Until next time, never invite a cannibal for dinner, and be sure to tune in to Carrion Creature Feature.